As a neutral fan, there is genuinely nothing better than a showdown, apart from the fact that it's 29-28 in the all-time win-loss column. Apart from the fact that it's the best rivalry, I would argue, in Australian sport because they genuinely hate each other. We actually get games that deliver. Some of these old-fashioned rivalries that just don't really exist anymore, whereas in Victoria, Geelong and Collingwood are probably your biggest rivals, does not come bloody close to what the showdown delivers, and they write yet another chapter into this amazing book, and what a joy it was being able to watch. And yet, I'm going to start with a complaint. Welcome to Pessimistic Daz. Here's my complaint, and it's to the AFL. Why in the everlasting fuck is this game not a standalone Thursday or Friday game? Make it happen in 26. So from that into my first thought, which is actually going to be about the other games that have been on today, Saturday, of course, before we get into the winners, the losers, all of those kinds of things. The Hawks game, I didn't do a Hawks react. I am not going to for this game because I truly, do believe that the reactions work a hell of a lot better, effectively as close to post-siren as possible, but pre and post-production makes it a couple of hours after the siren goes. Something that I would love to get better at doing and want to get more efficient at doing, and I try to do the best that I can. But I listened to it on the radio coming back from the Melbourne Zoo as it was the Mrs. Little Bloke's birthday weekend outing. And let me tell you, he loved the meerkats and he loved the lions. Not enough to barrack for them. He's still a good Hawks boy. But it was a slog listening on the radio as it probably was at the ground. The Hawks looked dominating in the last quarter. I haven't watched a second of that game yet. I have seen the Cozzy Pickett trip, which is comical that it wasn't given. But the Hawks ran away with it, which we love to see. I will be doing the MVP votes for that a little bit later on. The second game, the Bombers, loved everything that they did defensively. I was able to watch the last 20-odd minutes of that game. What they've been able to do defensively was fantastic. Looking at the major ball winners and stats of that game, clearly transition and turnover was the way that it goes. And Zach Reid just might be the messiah of Essendon's backline. He and Ben Mackay today worked together beautifully. Yes, they didn't have a good tall forward line to go up against, but still. And then Gold Coast Bulldogs, that was pretty awesome to flick through while I was on break watching these games, while it was quarter time, halftime, three-quarter time, flicking over to the game. It made it hard to flick back, but I wanted to do a proper game review for the showdown. And the way the Gold Coast were able to stand up, they were so mature throughout that performance. They absolutely deserved that win, and the Dogs, they lost no respect and no friends over that performance. So they're my first thoughts on the games that is not this one. So let's talk about the game. Let's start with the winners, the Crows. Look, I'm going to be honest here. I tipped Port, and I'll go through the reasons why, and the reasons why I feel a little bit stitched up by that was very simple. No club, I think, in AFL history plays better when the world is against them than Port Adelaide under Ken Hinkley. And by the way, that is why I'm about to give Adelaide a shit ton of credit, by the way. So hang in there with me, Crows fans. I'm not saying this to be a dick. I promise you, come with me on this journey. But it was so they were at home, of course, with the home fans. It was the perfect time to bounce from that absolute shellacking into testing out the mental fragility of the Crows, and they should have got them with their inaccurate kicking in the last quarter, but Adelaide's defense was incredible, genuinely incredible. Mark Keane's mark. Is it mark of the year? No. Should we hang it in the Louvre? Absolutely we should. That was one of the most courageous things you've ever seen, and really glad that he didn't get hurt from that. Bloody glad that it didn't end up in, a turnover or something crazy like that took away the specialness of that mark. I still would have liked to get the tip right, but you've got to understand as a neutral watching this is that you want the best result from a narrative point of view. That, even though it wasn't, with 4 seconds left, circa a Leo Barry, for example, and I know it's not a grand final, but still, that was awesome. The fact that we're going to still be able to talk about that mark, because he took it with still a minute and a half left, by the way. I found it hilarious when Dwayne Russell was like, it could be a game saver, and I'm thinking 110 seconds left or something like that. Jesus, Dwayne, you've gone early, but it held up, which was really cool, and he was awesome. I think he had 15 intercepts. Mark Keane did, which is massive. But to kickstart the game for the Crows, and what was so interesting is that as much crap as Port deserved for the way that they were pretty poor offensively in terms of their finishing throughout the entirety of the second half, if we're being honest. But the fourth quarter especially, they were 10 goals, 6 or 8, I think, coming into three-quarter time. But Riley Thilthorpe, boy, did he leave some short. Like, he kicked a snag, but left 2 short in that first quarter. It was his medal to lose. I still don't know how he lost it, but it was still there to lose. One of the kind of arguments or like similar performances that I can remember is something like Cyril in the 2015 grand final, right? Is that Cyril's second half, he was nowhere near the dominance that he set up in the first half and still deserved the medal because that's where the game was won. Now, because the game was so close, maybe the voters looked at it as a 4-quarter sample size, which I get, but they're still wrong. When the game was there to be won and the magic was there to be had, it was Riley Thilthorpe. Now, Isaac Rankin, in terms of the first 5 minutes of the fourth quarter, and we'll get to that in a second, was massive. I understand that. But when the Crows were nowhere, or when the Crows were trying to build something early in this game, it was the bloke in number 7. And just about that was it. James Peatling as well, who was fantastic, even though his foot skills weren't great tonight. They never really are in showdowns, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, Thriller should have won the medal. Sorry, Connor, but he should have. And it was clear that Adelaide's uncontested game was going to be key here because their midfield was spanked, to be honest. Like 50 Shades of Grey style. It was incredible in a really kind of negative way, I suppose, even though they did win the game, is just how much of an impact that the big four of Port Adelaide had around the stoppage. But once the Crows were able to get on transition, Port Adelaide were almost toothless. In that first quarter, the Crows kicked 21 points out of their 22 off turnover. So, yay, job done in that regard, which, again, for the Crows is fantastic. It's yet another string to their bow. I don't really understand why Sam Berry was sub if Matt Crouch wasn't playing. It is clear that they still need a contested style of player. And look, Sam Berry's ceiling is a B-grade Timu Jason Horne-Francis because he's got that burst away. He's never going to be great by foot. Neither is Horne-Francis. Neither is Dangerfield, by the way. But if we treat it as like a Pokemon evolution, you know, he is the Squirtle to the Blastoise of Patrick Dangerfield, which I bet you weren't expecting that freaking analogy coming into this video, but it's true. It's Sam Berry, it's Jason Horne-Francis' Wartortle, and then Blastoise is Patrick Dangerfield. That is a perfect analogy, and I will not hear any negativity about it in the comments. But if we go through the 3 moments of magic in that last quarter that got it done, of course, the first one being the Rankin and Thilthorpe quick hand style that ended up with the snap for Fogarty, which, what a beautiful kick Darcy Fogarty is, which I know is not news to anyone, but still, chef's kiss, 10 out of 10, my friend. My goodness gracious me. And then Rankin again running into the open goal off the turnover in Port Adelaide's forward 50. It was Riley O'Brien taking the mark down the line. Quick hands, which most ruckmen should do. And as a Hawthorn fan, I'm very grateful that Max Gawn did not want to do that in big spots today. If I go off the radio commentary, but Rankin ran into the open goal, which was lovely. And at the very next contest, Riley O'Brien, who I've criticised this year, up against Vicentini, who he should be beating, but still, you've got to be able to do this. And just the beautiful flick. The flick. Dawson, who Drew did an amazing job on him, and I'll give Drew his flowers in a second. Burst from stoppage, which is exactly why you tag the guy, because that's what he can do. Drove it inside 50. Fogarty dropped the chest mark. Like, Fog, man, come on, you're better than that. And then the kick off the ground. It basically came off his ankle or his shin, but it went through, which is all that matters, and it ended up being the bridge too far, which, again, they're the kind of moments that you look at and go, that's what won you the game. Like, I get Ablett winning the 89 grand final, or Norm Smith medal, I should say, for his 9 goals in a 1-goal game. That makes sense to me, especially considering the Hawks in that game didn't really have one particular game breaker. But you've got Maurice Rioli, who did it earlier on when, let's be honest, Wayne Johnston, the Dominator, should have won the Norm Smith medal. No offense to you, Maurice, or the Rioli family, but it's just, I've watched that game a lot, and it's still the Dominator for me. And then Chris Judd in 2005, again, that made a little more sense in such a close game because the Swans didn't have an out-and-out game breaker that dominated the way that Thilthorpe did, which is a shame. And then, yeah, Mark Keane, take a bow. There's no other way to end the analysis for the Crows there. They were really good on the outside. Was it the perfect performance? No. Would a Crow side previously drop that game? Absolutely, they would have, and they deserve credit for that. Yes, the Crows at Adelaide Oval are a different team than the Crows on the road, but massive respect to them for this game. Well done. Let's talk about Port. So I really want to make one thing clear. Connor Rozee was not bad in this game. He had a couple of really bad moments. The chip out of the square to Lachie Jones arguably could have done a little bit more than just stick his hand out, but I digress. He just got to hit that target 11 times out of 10. That resulted in Rochelle getting the turnover. I can't remember who he gave it to in the square. Was it Fogg, maybe? Anyway, doesn't matter. Not good by Connor in that regard, but throughout the game, he was fantastic. Was he even Port Adelaide's best player? And was he their second best player? Because I would argue Zach Butters did more to get them back into the game. And I would argue that Miles Bergman, who, by the way, speaking of blokes that are having their contract numbers just rocketing upwards in a massive way, oh boy, after the way that he went with Dawson in the end, I think I just said Drew dragged Rankin. Bergman went to Dawson and did a fantastic job. Had 6 touches in the first quarter, which was fantastic for him. And then when it came to trying to quell the Crows' momentum in the second quarter, it was actually Darcy Byrne-Jones who was the clean player. His second and third quarters, second more so, but were, like I said, ultra clean. He was fantastic throughout that portion of the game. So Port Adelaide had a lot of things going. They had 8 out of their first 10 clearances in the third quarter, and it was just, if you just could convert, just convert. If only they had a small forward that may have been able to make an impact at ground level. But I digress. Mitch Georgiades just needs help. Ollie Lord is just not enough help at this point. Now, hopefully, that can become more so as Lord gets more footy. I'm not, by all means, kicking Lord to the curb there in any way, shape or form. But Port made a statement at selection. They needed to respond after last week's crushing loss. They did that. Now, of course, the swings and roundabouts of this kind of analysis changes immeasurably if a goal is kicked. And I do want to say something before the last quarter thing as well, although this happened in the last quarter, was why were people on Twitter giving Christian Moraes shit for what he did on the Wayne Miller turnover? Can someone explain that to me? Because for the love of Christ, I can't figure out what else he was meant to do. He had no one ahead of him from a Port Adelaide point of view. He had a Crow coming from behind his right shoulder, had a Crow coming across his left side. He bought time, found Georgiades. That was how he was able to take 2 Crows out of the contest with his sidestep because of the guys that were going at Moraes. Georgiades just didn't hit the kick. Moraes didn't do anything wrong there. So yeah, that's my footy fan, what the fuck are you talking about kind of rant there, to be honest. The disappointing part for Port, though, look, they needed one more tall defender. They just didn't have one outside of Alir and Radigalia because whether it was Tex, who was pretty quiet throughout the entirety of the night, but they kind of needed to put Lachie Jones on Ryan Burton as like a 2 men in a cape kind of thing from an old, Goonies sketch. That's what I was trying to say. That's probably what, they needed to do. They obviously can't do that, and that was just an on-field thing. Did it cost them the game? Not really. And that sounds weird because I'm saying that Thilthorpe should have won the Showdown medal, which is weird that it doesn't have a name, but Showdown medal's fine, which is its name, but as in it's not named after a player or something like that. Like the Glendenning Allen medal is what I'm trying to say here. But they just needed one more. They needed one more 100, and it was nights like this where I was like, yeah, they did play Trent McKenzie as a lockdown key defender in finals. This is why. Now, did it work? You could argue no, because they didn't make a grand final. Was Trent McKenzie the reason for that? Absolutely not. But the biggest thing that Port Adelaide have to clean up are the turnovers. The turnover differential was 15, and Port Adelaide turned the ball over 71 times, which is just not good enough. And as I said before, the fact that the Crows were able to score so efficiently off turnover is what is going to sting. So as we get to the end of the showdown, this was epic, and it's probably going to get over-dissected. You may think I've over-dissected it in this video. This was a pleasure to watch, a pleasure to be a part of as a neutral fan watching at home while my pregnant missus hurts all the time, and it's 100% my fault, and I accept that. But this was a joy to watch. I loved it. I hope you did too. I know you wouldn't have if you're a Power fan, but everyone else, I hope if you did watch this game, even if it was some of it, you enjoyed the spectacle that we were given. Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe to join the Daz Talks Footy family. I'm going to try and do something for tomorrow. I'm going to be very busy again tomorrow. We're going to try and do something for you there outside of the round review, which of course you can see as a part of my YouTube shorts. If you want to check out my TikTok, you can, which has got footy edits that just can't be uploaded to YouTube because they will just never get monetized. And I like doing those because it helps improve my craft. And you don't have to look at this. And that's only a win for you guys. So I hope you enjoyed your day. I hope you enjoy your evening. Make sure you check in on your mates. Just because it's not Spud's game doesn't mean that we stop caring. Love you all. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.